Mr. Speaker, as I rise to address this Honorable House as part of the 2020 budget debate, I give thanks to Almighty God for this beautiful gift of life, for health and strength, and the opportunity to serve the people of Guyana. I must say, Mr. Speaker, that given everything that would have happened, including the death of my two cousins, since August the 2nd, 2020, things have really gotten out of control, including the spiraling death rate due to coronavirus, Mr. Speaker. I have never been more thankful for life. As I make this presentation, Mr. Speaker, Guyana's coronavirus death rate has taken a quantum leap during the past month. And some honorable member in this House is responsible for that. Mr. Speaker, frankly speaking, no pun intended here, this development is unacceptable, to say the least. The Honorable Minister of Health, even prior to taking the oath, wanted us, the good people of this country, to believe that he had the magic prescription to control and prevent the spread of coronavirus here in Guyana. It has now been over 1 month since he has taken up his portfolio, and we, the good people of this country, are still waiting on that minted cutting-edge strategy to address the serious public health pandemic. All we are getting is a lot of pontification, fluff, and bluff. And to hear that minister come to this honorable house during these budget debates and trivialize the issues related to the health and well-being of the people of this country is nothing short of a travesty and is most disappointing, to say the least. Mr. Speaker, the people of this country deserve better. We have to get answers as to why the death in COVID-19 is decreasing globally, and we are seeing the reverse here in Guyana. We need answers. Mr. Speaker, given these frightening trends, I was expecting to see under the education sector in this budget a more robust and sustainable plan to mitigate the effects and the aftershock of COVID-19 that would lead to the risk of regression of many of our students, especially those whose basic foundational learning was not strong to begin with, as my friend here. Mr. Speaker, the future of education lies in the application of an appropriate blended approach, not limited to ICT. Mr. Speaker, as these debates are ongoing, the biggest question on the minds of the people of this country in relation to education is, would the shift in education policy, administration, and governance in Guyana leave our children behind? Mr. Speaker, this oral question is both urgent and important, given the PPPC's track record in education, coupled with the implications of the COVID-19 pandemic, and as with most crises, the effects will be most damaging to the most vulnerable and disadvantaged populations, including learners from low income and remote areas. Mr. Speaker, The decision was made to close our schools on March 13, 2020. As a result of this closure, a number of emergency measures were implemented by the David Granger administration to mitigate the adverse effects associated with school closures, including the potential for students to fall behind in their education. It should be noted, Mr. Speaker, that the emergency efforts were part of a wider plan for the delivery of public education, remote learning and teaching scheme, fondly referred to as PEARLS. This initial rollout, while laudable, had to be evaluated for sustainability purposes, as well as to identify gaps. Having completed that evaluation, the Ministry of Education needs to communicate to the public what areas of that initiative will be sustained, strengthened, or discontinued. The clock is ticking. Classes have recommenced, and there is no critical information on areas such as what percentage of our teachers have been trained in online and blended learning skills to ensure the delivery of quality education during COVID-19 in Guyana. The quality of teachers is the most important and significant determinant of student output. The quality of the school system cannot and will not exceed the quality of teachers. Mr. Speaker, similarly, the public should know where the Ministry of Education is with supporting engagement with parents, especially those who have children with special education needs, and those parents who are not proficient in ICT and other areas of remote learning. These are minimum imperatives given our new reality in education. And parents are still asking and clamoring for this training. Up to this morning, several persons, including parents, continue to contact me and many of my colleagues in relation to guidance, as there is growing concern that lack of parental involvement in technology will further exacerbate the inequality in education. Mr. Speaker, we know too well that the most privileged can afford tutors and fiber optic internet, while the poorest and most marginalized are likely to be experiencing different forms of challenges and even neglect. Given that disparity, some of our children will return to school without missing much, while others will not return at all. Mr. Speaker, it is therefore both unfortunate and regrettable that this budget is void of any measure to specifically address our most disadvantaged and marginalized students. Every other country in the world, Mr. Speaker, have educational programs that are specifically geared to address these marginalized groups as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Speaker, by now it is common knowledge that remote learning is posing a challenge for many students, especially those with underlying conditions and comorbidities, and also those living in far-flung communities. These challenges include little or no connectivity, lack of access to online educational assessment equipment, and unfamiliarity with remote and distant learning techniques, and I have to add, the frequent blackouts that we are experiencing. Mr. Speaker, if these basic areas are not addressed, all disparities linked to socioeconomic status, ethnicity, and special education needs will continue to emerge as fault lines in Guyana's education response. There must be a concerted effort to provide the necessary support and tools to all of our students in this regard. And it is in that context that I will say that the 15,000 cash grant is not targeted nor evidence-based to respond nor to provide resilience of the education system in these COVID-19 times. Mr. Speaker, I have to say that because we care cannot be handed out on a voucher. It has to be demonstrated in the policies and programs. And from all that we have seen and heard, there are no programs contained in this budget that is demonstrative of that care. In fact, you heard from one of my colleagues how an honorable member sitting in this house told teachers that if they don't like the pay, they can leave the job. I am asking all of the teachers in this honorable house that were subjected to that crass, puerile, and insensitive behavior to say aye. The ayes have it. Similarly, the one laptop per family program would have outlived its usefulness. And we have learned from several commentators that many homes have more than one learner and therefore will require the use of more than one electronic device to facilitate online and blended learning, which has become the new reality due to COVID-19. The government of Guyana, therefore, at this critical time, when school would have recommenced for the new academic year 2020-21, must commit with some urgency dedicated evidence-based programs that will cater for the individual needs of all our learners. Mr. Speaker, as we look to the future, we have to ensure that the temporary disruption of schooling does not become a permanent loss of education. Guyana has made significant strides in education delivery during the past 5 years, and we have said our goodbyes to the No Child Left Behind policy, and we will not embrace any policy that will leave all of our children behind. The people of this country demand better, and it is expected that the Ministry of Education will leverage the gains already made for the benefit of the Guyanese people. Mr. Speaker, the people of this country have every right to believe in a better life as we proceed to develop our nation from year to year and from administration to administration. Along the way on this journey, there have been and will always be highs and lows, twists and turns, but that's life and that's politics. But how we respond as a country is entirely dependent on the efficiency, efficacy, and effectiveness of the leadership which is brought to bear on our circumstances, whatever they might be. Mr. Speaker, in responding to some of the comments made by presenters from the other side of this house, I have to set the record straight. Mr. Speaker, I refuse to use this honorable house to discuss matters related to my subordinates or I would not go as far as to bring anybody personal fight here. But in terms of the rehiring of the chief education officer, this is someone who had reached the statutory age of requirement, and therefore the issue of dismissal does not arise. Honorable member, I have to say that you know I can do a lot of things. But believe me, I can't fix people's birthdays. And I have to agree with Madam Teixeira in this particular instance that you certainly can't trust some of the attorneys. In terms of the various initiatives implemented for COVID-19, nothing new is being proposed by the current administration. As early as May of this year, Guyana was cited as one of 4 Caribbean countries implementing blended approach, which included all of what is being claimed by the current government. Mr. Speaker, I have here before me a report to Commonwealth for Ministers of Education from Response to Resilience, dated May 2020. Mr. Speaker, Guyana, Jamaica, Belize, and Bahamas would have already made progress in TV and radio channels, in interactive radio, e-learning portfolio, and many of the other recommendations. Mr. Speaker, the data don't lie. Mr. Speaker, it is one thing we know as policymakers in education. It is that you will always begin with the end in mind. And you have to ask yourself what it is that you want for our children that cause you to embark on a particular program. If your response to that question is nebulous, then you know it cannot be the intention and the best interest that our students will reach their full potential. Mr. Speaker, the history of this country is rife with the gains made in the education sector during the past 5 years. We have left an education sector better than we found it. And the data speaks for itself. Mr. Speaker, when the David Braintree-led administration came into government in 2015, we took over an education sector that was in crisis. The performance of the nation's children at the national and regional examination in the past 5 years serves as a clear indication. In 2015, for instance, the national grade 6 assessment results were appalling as the previous years, for which I have seen the data. In fact, 23% of our students were passing their national grade 6 examination. And in 5 short years, we have seen incremental improvement in all subject areas. In some instances, more than 60%. We have also improved the working conditions and remuneration package for teachers. The best they have gotten in decades, Mr. Speaker. We have initiated curriculum reform after 4 decades. Mr. Speaker, we on this side of the House knew a 40-plus-year-old curriculum cannot deliver the breadth of skills required for the 21st century. In 2018, after an absence of more than a decade, the David Braintree administration commenced teachers' training program in Region 8. With regards to attendance at schools, we have seen improvements, particularly at the secondary level, and we were able to significantly reduce dropout rates. The people of this country can accept nothing less than to keep the momentum and gains we have made in education. Mr. Speaker, I am proud of the track record of the coalition government in the education sector. I am proud. It is often said, Mr. Speaker, that people get governments that they deserve. But I can tell you, the people of this country deserve much better than a PDP government. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I cannot stand here in good conscience and support this budget, given the glaring inadequacies, inequities, and rank disparity that will result from the implementation of these measures contained therein. There is an obvious lack of foresight to effectively deliver quality education to all of the students of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, it concerns me that we can return to what we had as education delivery during the 23 years of PVP governance. There is a false belief and this grossly unfounded notion peddled by the PVP that all the programs of the coalition were flawed. I don't know if they are listening to themselves, especially since it is difficult to imagine how any political party, for that matter, can be in government for 23 consecutive years and had a litany of wars and failed projects that I will not rehash in this honorable House. Yet these same people can turn around in 5 short years after admitting office and paint a picture of doom and gloom and realistically think that they are extricated. Mr. Speaker, I wish to place on record that this 2020 budget is woefully inadequate, both in the sums allocated and the policies adumbrated for education. And it has left many persons, including me, worried about the outlook for basic education in Guyana, now and in the long term. There is obviously a lack of coordination across key divisions, creating duplication, overlapping, and gaps in key activities. Again, I say, Mr. Speaker, the people of this country deserve better. I thank you.